Hey Chris, how's it going? Checking in, getting ready for our third podcast.
Yeah. How's it going, Court?
Doing well, man. We were going to get a little bit more technical and talk about bike lights. Maybe it follows on with some of the winter riding gear and stuff that we talked about, because you want to be seen and it gets dark earlier, it stays dark longer. This is kind of exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely excited about it. And, I feel like it's a topic that, doesn't get kind of dove into too deeply. And I think that, it's an opportunity to kind of talk about it and, look at some of the different options and, just kind of spark that discussion more. But yeah, before we get into that, like, how's it going by you? What have you been up to?
Thanks for asking, man. I'm in Southern California, trying to stay warm and keep reviewing, keep the ball moving. It's been a little bit rainy, but all in all, life is good. And I've published a bunch of reviews lately. Just did the Bulls eStream Evo 3 Carbon 27.5 Plus. This is a real standout for me because I love lightweight stuff, and I also appreciate like the comfort and just the style of electric mountain bikes. And this was one that it blends in just so well. I mean, have you actually seen one of these in person? You carry Bulls, right, at Propel Bikes?
Right. Yeah, we carry them. I haven't had that bike in the store yet, but I did see it at the shows and stuff like that. And Bulls has definitely been pushing the envelope. Actually, Fernando for Bulls was just at the store last week in New York, which is kind of cool. And
oh wow.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I kind of learned a little bit more of the backstory of the company and that sort of stuff, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But they were basically started by a cooperative of dealers in Germany, and now the largest bike manufacturers, or kind of owned by one of the largest bike manufacturers in the world, I guess.
Huh.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that sort of recap. I have heard him talk about it a little bit, and they've lived all over. I think they lived in where was it, at Ecuador, where e-bikes were actually, it was kind of popular, and they did such a great job that Bulls was like, hey, head on over to the United States and open it up,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's interesting to see someone, kind of a bit of a different background and kind of moving all over the world with
yeah.
He told me that he used to sell tools and he sold shoes, but he's most excited about selling bikes. He's very passionate about it, and he's like, pretty cool.
Well, you need tools and shoes to ride bikes, so
yes,
he sounds prepared. I wanted to call out just another area of this bike, and Bulls in particular. I haven't seen this with any other manufacturer. They've got that little rocker button up, button down to change assist, and it's transflective. That glows too, right? Is it black backlit or not?
I believe so, yeah. I believe it is backlit.
It's just so compact, and coming back to that stealth aspect, sometimes when you're riding a mountain bike, you don't want people being like, well, what's that? You want to just blend in, and this bike, very much like the Specialized Turbo, they both use the Bros drive system, and this one has 2 bottle cage bosses, which I'm always talking about. And bottle cage bosses came up recently because I posted this review for it's like a GPS.
The boomerang, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see that, Chris?
I did, and actually, one of my customers, Bruce, who's on the forum, over 50, and he got one personally, and I think he had similar sentiments to you that it's concept, but I think it's not totally there, unfortunately, which. And I don't know, maybe it might be up to kind of one of these much larger brands to kind of come up with something that's very dialed in,
It's a great first swing, and it actually exposed or sort of surfaced a lot of use cases I hadn't thought of, like the whole geofencing. So if you have a fleet, you can see and you get alerts if someone's like going out of bounds. If you have a kid that has like some sort of neighborhood limits, or if maybe you do the tours and you rent bikes as well, and you can do a heat map and be like, oh, this is where all of our people go when they're on their own. Like, let's do a tour on that side of town. It is a neat concept. But messing with it and actually trying to get it to, it takes a minute. And a lot of people were kind of in the comments saying like, this thing's sort of big, and I'm just not sure. I want it to be hidden, or some other people, were like, no, I want it to be seen so people don't tamper with my bike, and whatever. I'm just kind of glad that we have those options. And again, on a bike that actually has bottle cage bosses, like a mountain bike, like the Bulls that we were just talking about, the Carbon. The other review that came out recently was it was for this really cool kind of compact cargo bike, the Benno Boost, and you and I shot that together. And how's that been going for you? Can you chime in on that brand at all?
Yeah, Benno's great. I mean, you could tell that it's really built by somebody that rides the bike, and apparently that's kind of his history. I mean, is kind of I guess the nickname of the founder of Benno, and he was previously the co-founder of Electra, and then they were bought by Trek, and then I guess after several years he ended up leaving, and he was kind of out of the industry for a little while. But from what he describes, he was kind of doing research and development for his next product, which I guess he did a full line, which he just launched at Interbike electric bikes, but the electric version was the Boost D, and it's a really nice bike. I think for brands where you want something a little bit more compact, you don't want a super long cargo bike. It makes a lot of sense, and I mean, I don't know if you recall, but the fit and finish of it is just really well done.
Well, the other thing that's neat about it is it has lights integrated. So it has the Supernova up front, and I think it even has the Supernova 3 LED on the rear rack.
Right, yeah.
And so this is, this might be a good time to jump into our topic a little bit. I guess I haven't asked you how you're doing, but I am kind of excited to get into the lights. Real quick, like,
Sure.
Is the store going well? And by the way, for those who don't know,
everything's going well. I know you're in California. I'm actually coming out to California next week for the Bosch dealer advisory board, where I think they picked 15 dealers or so throughout the country, and cool. So we are meeting up every so often. This will be our first meeting at Irvine at the Bosch headquarters, so I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully maybe we get a chance to connect in person while I'm out there. Only there for 2 days, but it should be cool. But,
that's awesome. Congrats on being one of those dealers. And I was saying a second ago, for those who haven't seen the other podcasts, Chris does Propel bikes in Brooklyn, New York. So that's a bit of a flight right there, or a couple of flights.
Yeah. So, but definitely looking forward to it. And, we have a really bond with Bosch. I think, their products, we're a big fan. So it's definitely good to have, a little bit more of a connection with them on that level. So, I think we want to get into the lights. I actually have kind of some lights just to kind of show some examples. I did put a post up on the forum showing some of the different brands that are out there, and I think there's just been a lot more development in this area over the past year. Several brands have introduced new lights, and Light in Motion is a brand that they bike light, which previously they didn't have e-bike lights. So I think that there's definitely a lot of growth in this section, and I think it's cool to see what's going on.
Yeah, Chris, I'm looking at that post. You did a really good job just highlighting some of the options. And what I love about these aftermarket lights, he's not just talking about the rubber band lights or the ones that you screw on or something. These are more permanently affixed and screw on. I guess I'm thinking like with a finger nut or something like that.
Yeah.
These ones are more permanent, and you actually do use a screw or a bolt to fasten it to the bike, and then they're wired in. They run off the main battery. I'm actually looking at the Bush & Mueller Lumotech IQ2. I really like this one because you can see it shines out from the sides a little bit, not just forward. And if we come back to the Benno Boost, I mean, this is a great bike, and I love the Supernova light because it's metal and it's real compact and it fastens right to the handlebars. But it's also, it's only forward really. It's like it doesn't have that surround type of view. And this is, I don't know if you could even swap it if you wanted, Chris. Like you're the expert in this. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about what this means and which systems actually allow you to wire in lights aftermarket.
Yeah, so basically, in order to run lights off an electric bike battery, there's a variety of different ways to do it. The older kind of rudimentary version would be to tie directly into the battery. And the challenge with that is then you need to figure out some way to switch the light on and off if the light doesn't have a switch on it.
Oh, yeah.
And the other challenge is that the battery is, 24, 36, 48 volts. And oftentimes that's kind of high voltage for what the lights really require. Most lights are somewhere between like 5 and 10 watts or something like that. It doesn't really use that much power. So if you think about it, a high voltage battery, running into light, it's kind of overkill a little bit. So systems, they actually use a step-down converter. So it basically steps down that voltage into something that's more usable, which most of the lights will run off of 6 volts or 12 volts with some of the newer, more powerful systems here to work with them. So I think that's one of the things that most of the e-bike lights are kind of built for that purpose, to run off of the 6 volts or 12 volts even. Elements with that is that they are DC. So there's basically 2 different types of power, the AC and DC power. Now, many lights that are made for AC power, which those are dynamo powered lights. So the dynamo produces AC power, so alternating current, where a battery produces DC current, which is the direct current. That you can't use the AC power, that you can't use the AC lights on a battery, but there are some lights that run both AC, DC, but most of them, they're very specific. So historically, because e-bikes are kind of a newer thing, and dynamo lights have been around since early days of bicycles, you see a lot more AC powered lights, but now more and more we're starting to see them specifically developed for e-bikes.
It's funny you mentioned dynamo lights, because there are a few companies that include them, and I've heard in Europe where it's like, hey, if your battery completely runs dry, you've still got the dynamo light, it's still going to work, and you don't have to worry about it. I'm looking at an Easy Motion Evo City Wave, I think that might have had that, and some of the, like the Kalkoff Tasman Classic, the Focus Aventura Pulse. It's a neat feature, but it seems like it's going to add a little bit of weight. And then maybe the quick release isn't going to be a possibility on your wheel because you've got the dynamo there. And so I get it and I appreciate it, but it begs the question, like, how much power do you mentioned volts and watts and everything, but you're running a couple LED lights on your bike. How much damage is that going to do on your battery? Are you going to lose 5 miles of range or what?
It's very minimal, because if you think about it, if we're talking about something 5 to 10 watts as opposed to a 350 watt or 500 watt motor, or whatever the case may be, it's a pretty minimal amount. So maybe you're using 1/2 of your battery, when you're using it, in contrast to what the motor is actually using. So I find that it's the benefit generally outweighs the cost of having a separate setup. I think that as you mentioned, the dynamo that does add some weight to the bike, and I think that it's something you'll commonly find for city e-bikes, where maybe you're not as sporty, you're not kind of much and that sort of thing, and maybe doing some longer touring with it. and you might be in those situations where the battery runs out.
Yeah.
Be good, use scenarios where it might make sense to have a dynamo, because really anticipate that your battery might, run out, and you still want to have your lights.
Yeah. But I have noticed that, like you said before, those batteries or those lights, you have like a separate on-off switch, whereas the integrated ones, a lot of times, with the Bosch system, for example, some of the bikes you get just straight up come with lights, and the ones that don't, like a lot of times the mountain bikes, the Intuvia display still has a light button, and so once they're wired in, you can kind of activate the lights using that. Chris, a minute ago, you've been kind of cutting in and out a little bit. I think just the internet signal or something. Were you saying 1% to 2% of your battery capacity? Could you confirm?
Yeah, about because if you think about it, it's somewhere between 5 to 10 watts that the light is using. If you contrast that with what a motor is using, somewhere between even 800 watts and maybe some of the peak power.
Yeah,
it's a very small percentage. Couple percent, if that.
Okay. Well, so from here, we've talked a little bit about how these lights might perform and dynamos and stuff. Have you ever done a dynamo light, by the way? Have you ever installed one?
Yes, we have. I mean, there's many bikes that come with the dynamo lights, as you had mentioned before. Several of the brands that we work with, Easy Motion, Kalkoff, etc. But we have installed, but generally speaking, more often than not, we're installing e-bike specific lights on the bike.
Okay, and then let's see here. I guess the next step logically here is to say, well, it's great that these exist. You started off talking about the old-fashioned way where you kind of wire it into the battery. Does that mean that you can do this on like any electric bike, or are there certain systems that don't allow it? And which ones are the easiest? Like maybe you can just walk through some of the more common,
Sure. I'd say on the easiest side would be some of the systems that do actually tie directly into the motor system. They already have the ability to do so. I actually happen to have here a Bosch motor, and it kind of just to show. This is the non-drive side of the Bosch motor, and basically this is the wire that comes out of the motor light too. So this is a system that it comes with this, because the manufacturer chose to spec it, from the factory, or it's something that we can add on. So it has the connection for front light as well as the rear light, and that the general output is 6 volts. Now they recently, on the new updated system, it can 12 volts, which can run some of the more powerful lights, like the new Supernova M99, which is this light, which you'll see on. Now I know you had reviewed the grinder, which I'm sorry. Maybe did you publish that one yet? Or
which one? Oh, the daily grinder. And again, sorry, Chris. Like every other word is kind of getting blurred out a little bit. So you were saying it goes from 6 volts to 12 volts now, and that the Supernova M99s on the Stromer ST2 and the daily grinder from Bowles?
Right, the Stromer ST2S, the Bowles daily grinder, also Risa Mueller has the Delight M99. This is kind of, I'd say it's like one of the gold standards for e-bike lights now. It's very powerful, very durable. It's aluminum case here, and it's a very nice system.
The other thing about that light, so here I'm scrolling through some pictures of the ST2S showing it up there. And again, this is like a $10,000 electric bike here. This is premium. It was the first one that had this light that I saw. It's got these like heat sink fins on it. It's adjustable angle. And I noticed that it has kind of like a sort of an LED pattern on it, kind of a ring. And then there's also the shine mode. So this light's sort of about being seen as well as helping you to see. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, is there, is there like a way to change between those modes using the Bosch Intuvia, or how does this thing actually work?
So this specific light, which comes in 3 different configurations. Now the light that's on the Stromer ST2S is the M99 Pro, which is kind of their top of the line. And there are 2 different levels. So it has a beam similar to what you find on a car or a motorcycle. And this is something pretty unique to, these type of lights. And, that's something that only, Stromer has, Supernova has done.
You said a high beam, right?
So, right.
Okay, cool. So the one that's on the daily grinder, what are the modes that this one has, and how do you cycle through them using the Intuvia?
So, actually, I'm not 100% sure if the daily grinder has I believe it has the M99 Pure, which doesn't have the high and low beam. Now, currently, powered bike that I'm aware of that has the M99 Pro is the Rosignol Delight Roll-Off GX.
Oh.
It's a special configuration that actually Rosignol developed because basically you need 2 lead outs. So the Bosch motor only puts 1 lead for the front. Rosignol has kind of developed a custom lead to power the high beam and the low beam, and they've a little bracket to put the switch. It looks kind of like a horn button or something like that, and you could switch kind of from the high beam and low beam. But generally speaking, the Bosch system will just do the 1 mode, where you can turn the light on and turn it off. Knows what future updates might.
I just got a text from Brett here. Are you getting the same thing?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, do you want to see if he's available to kind of link in, or
yeah, I'm going to text him here. I might add him, or he might just join. So that's the switch you were mentioning is very cool, because I think that's one of the challenges. A lot of times with aftermarket bike lights, you can press, and it's like full bright, low bright, flashing, off.
Right.
There's modes, and a lot of the e-bike lights, it's sort of just on or off. Has that been your experience?
So that's an interesting question. It's something that comes out pretty often. So Germany, where many of the lights are developed and where e-bikes are a much bigger thing. So, and I think, generally speaking, developed for the European market, and then they end up making their way over here, sometimes with some modifications. In Germany, actually, it's illegal to have blinking lights.
Oh.
In the U.S. and particularly in places like New York, where there's a lot of light pollution, it's helpful to have a blinking light, because you kind of need something to differentiate yourself from all the other lights that exist out there.
Yeah.
Many of these lights are developed for that market, and they just have kind of one setting specifically for the tail lights. I think a lot of people are looking for tail light or something like that, and pretty much all of them are solid. That is, however, there's one exception to that, actually. Light in Motion, which is actually that has been producing many different lights. They recently added e-bike lights to and they do actually have flashing modes. So that's it's kind of interesting to see that new development there.
Would that include the Light in Motion nip and tuck set that you put in your little article on the forum?
Yeah, so that does have different settings, and I believe that the button is actually on the light.
Yeah.
So on if you were to connect it to the Bosch system, for example, you just turn it on and off, and then you have the ability to change to some different modes through the individual lights.
I like that. That's a really cool way to deal with it, because they're still wired in. You still get to run off the main battery, and it's just such a hassle, taking the lights off, plugging them in, even if they're rechargeable. If they're not, throwing away batteries or, just dealing with, it's awesome to have stuff like this wired in. Do you know how many shops do what you do, Chris, where you actually open the motor up and connect the lights? Is this pretty common with electric bike local stores or what?
I think so. I think that it's super common, but I think, most competent shops should be capable of it, and, really welcomes it. And I think most of the other manufacturers kind of leave accommodations to possible.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is, certain systems like the Bosch system, you will actually have to activate the lights if they have not been activated from the factory. So most of the time, if the bike, it's like, for example, if it's a mountain bike, a lot of the mountain bikes don't come with lights. So if you wanted to install lights on there, accomplish most things on your own, but you would actually need a Bosch dealer to turn the lights on, or or a Shimano system, or whatever the case may be.
Is this very expensive to do, like where you need the light wire harness thing and you need the tech time and stuff? Like, what do you charge to do this kind of service, and what are the parts that you need to maybe special order besides the lights themselves?
Yeah, it's not very costly. I mean, the light wires from Bosch, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's under $10 a wire or something like that. You need the front and rear wire. As far as the labor involved, a lot of times we end up just kind of not charging for that labor if somebody's buying the lights from us, and we kind of just do it as kind of an extra service. We the idea of someone having that added feature to their bike, as well as having the additional safety of making sure that they do have the lights on. Most places, including New York, it's actually illegal to ride at night without lights. So, we definitely want to make sure that people have those accommodations. But as far as difficulty or anything like that, on the Bosch system, it's really a matter of, you have to take the non-drive side crank arm off, and then you have to take the cover off the one side. The challenge can be if you want to run the wires internally through the frame. Sometimes that can be difficult depending on the bike. Some of them can be pretty challenging to work with, and making sure everything looks really clean. So sometimes we kind of take some extra steps to do that. For example, if you wanted to put a light, like you've seen the Specialized Turbo, for example, that has a light post, and then kind of running the light through the seat post and that sort of thing. It takes a little bit extra effort to do that, but I think the end result is the way to go.
Awesome. Chris, I'm going to search for the turbo and show some pictures, because you're clear. Visually you're clear, but I mean, we're losing like numbers, locations, names of bikes, and it's I want people to be able to hear, and I also don't want to interrupt you when you're speaking. So let's try this for a little while. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's already sounding a lot better.
Right.
So I was pulling up this.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's a learning. This whole thing is.
I mean, even did you hear back from Brett by chance? What?
So just that he said, "Oops, I forgot." Like, because we're doing this podcast at a different time. We're recording at a different time this week, because there's the Super Bowl and things are happening this weekend. So I think his shop's open and there's more going on today for him. You and I prepared, and you're the one who made this great guide. So I'm just glad that worked. And yes, I'm looking at the Specialized Turbo now. The really old one, the 2013, it's like the first one, and you can see the lights wired in, and then they had this cool saddle that actually had lights right on the edge of the saddle. And people thought, like, yeah, that's neat, but I'm a big fan of, kind of a proponent of these suspension seat posts. And then it's like the lights wired in, so you have to take the saddle and try to change the wiring.
And we've actually done this before a couple of times, and like I said, sometimes we kind of go through these extra steps to make sure that one, the customer is happy, and then also the end result is something that we want, like above propel, so to speak. And we've installed body float C posts on several of the Specialized turbos and Turbo S's, and what we end up having to do is kind of drill a hole, and then we actually have to like leads and stuff like that. But the end result, it kind of ends up, kind of being a pretty factory look, and I think it's worthwhile. This is actually the light that that's used for the Specialized turbo. It's the same. It's also a supernova light, and it has the 3 red LEDs.
Oh. For those
it's
who are
something
looking
that
at this with me,
can be used.
it's this little tiny
Yeah.
piece in the middle. I'm sorry to speak over you, Chris, but at first I thought it was this whole box. It's this tiny little piece right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is just the packaging, but, it's, I can pull it out.
Yeah.
Something that is also available for aftermarket as well, that you could, install. And we've done that before in a similar way that Specialized has it on their bikes, which it's a pretty small light, but the output is very powerful.
Yeah, 3 LEDs right there. And on the turbo, it's convenient and kind of hidden, right there underneath the saddle. But one thing that comes to mind from our winter discussion last week is if you're wearing a long coat, a lot of times the back of your coat will like hang down and may cover the back of the saddle. And so a lot of times, especially people with commuters, they have racks and stuff on their bikes. If they have trunk bags, that's another thing. So it's a good position in terms of durability, and it's a little higher on your saddle, but on the other hand, you might want to put it on the back of a rack, or you might even at some point, this is where you get away from the wired in lights. You have something on your helmet, have something on your backpack, do what you can so that cars don't see, or cars don't, you don't have a situation and get hit by a car. Do you have any other thoughts on that, just like positioning of lights?
Yeah, I think that's a great point you brought up. I think, and actually, so Specialized Turbo and the Turbo S, does not come with the rack. So, and they actually have a city kit available. And if you they include a rear light on the rack, as you mentioned. I think that's actually a Bush and Mueller light, and you can kind of set it up in that way. And I think for exactly that purpose, if you're carrying stuff on the rack, there's a high likelihood that something might, you might end up blocking that. I think it is really a cool and everything like that, having it on their seat. But I guess, as far as utility, I think having it on the rack is probably one of the better and probably one of the more common installs that we end up doing for people.
Okay. Yeah, good to hear that. Chris, we're still, maybe it's just the connection slower. I've noticed that things are loading a little slower on my end, and maybe people are streaming for the game or something like that. Do you happen to have a pair of wired headphones that we could just try?
Yeah, let me just 1 second. I'll be right back.
Cool, thanks.
How are we doing? I'm gonna just keep talking. You can kind of let me know.
Yeah.
There's
I think that's again. It may be the internet connection, but I wanted to try everything.
I hear you though, so let's figure that one out.
Oh, you can't hear me yet?
But let's see.
Oh boy.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Hey guys, this is a couple hours after the podcast. I'm editing it and I realize, we were struggling with audio and we lost video signal at this point. So it's only black on the screen from here on out. I think I'm going to pause the podcasts for a little bit, try to figure out the connection thing. Just the way I live, traveling and doing the reviews, it might not be conducive to this format. So, really appreciate the people who have checked it out, but I don't want to lose you guys, and all the garbled communication isn't super fun to listen to. So, I'm going to go ahead and continue from now, but I wanted to kind of make that announcement that need some time to figure this out. Thanks.
You're sounding better there.
Can I speak? Yeah?
Yeah. I think that's...
Okay. Maybe that's the issue.
Yeah, well,
I have a couple things open here, so.
without further ado, I have this burning question to ask around lights again. So it feels like at the start of this conversation, it was you can wire them in like hardcore straight into the battery. That, I don't know if you're soldering stuff or special adapters, but there are like a bunch of different kinds of batteries out there. The other way was like, hey, Bosch has a connector point on the motor, but you need to be a dealer to kind of activate it, get the wires. What about in between? Like, what about Bros or the new Yamaha system or some of the Trans-X stuff like we see on Curry's systems, like iZip and Raleigh and stuff? What do those work like?
Yeah, many of the e-bike systems are actually coming with wires. Some of the iZip bikes, I recall, come standard with wires. Easy Motion will accept lights, but some of them will on kind of the Evo series and that sort of thing. The Bros system does have similar hookups like the Bosch system, but it all depends on like the Turbo Levo. They don't really have easy accommodations for that because they don't have a display or any sort of remote on the bike. So it might be a bit more to kind of figure out something to get that to work. We haven't encountered that specifically before, but on some of the other bikes like the Bulls that they use remote that has a button for the light, that'll make it a little bit easier to accommodate. One of the things we did mention is some of the lights that can work directly into the battery, and this light, for example, will run off of 12 volts to 60 volts, so you can actually connect it directly to the battery. So that's one way that you can go, and this particular one does not have a switch on it, but some of them do have a switch right on the back here.
Yeah.
An interesting point you had brought up before about the light up on the side of the IQX, the Bush and Mueller light. The Supernova was actually one of the original ones to kind of do that design, where this Super actually lights up on the side. So that is an important factor. It's actually another thing that was kind of brought up on the forum recently, is just having some sort of reflectors or whatever the case may be on the side of the bike, because you can have great lighting in the front and the rear, but if you don't have lights on the sides, then it might be difficult to see. I think most of the lights do try to cast a very wide beam, so it actually fans out, so it actually is, you can see it from the sides, but certainly having reflectors and clothing that's visible is a big factor.
Yeah, great point, Chris. A lot of panniers have reflectors. Some of the bike gear that we talked about, it can have reflective. I usually opt for like silver or white frames because they have just that bigger visual footprint. But then tires too. A lot of the more premium tires have reflective sidewall stripes, and you can swap those out. Or, depending on your style and if you're mostly on road, you could add some of the little bicycle light things, but you put like a battery pack on the hub, and it's like your whole wheel becomes like a light. Those are cool.
Yeah, definitely. Spoke reflectors or whatever, So there's all different sorts of stuff, but it's definitely something to be mindful of and important to do.
Have you ever been hit by a car at night or run into this type of issue yourself?
No, but I haven't, fortunately, but in this sort of population, it's something you hear about more. But I think it's particularly important in some of the kind of more rural areas. We don't have as much lighting, and it's you might be in areas that they don't have street lights, and you really need to be as visible as possible, and especially when people are not really anticipating seeing cyclists out at night, where a place like New York, it's there's so many cyclists all over the place, but you go to some more rural areas where cycling might not be as common, you definitely want to be particularly mindful in those situations. You're a little bit more at risk, unfortunately, especially if there's not bike infrastructure of their, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I was out there visiting you in New York recently, they have these really nice dedicated bike lanes with like separators, with like little plants or a median or something. And I get the impression, even though New York is known for like crazy driving and stuff, it's like relatively young, responsive drivers there. I didn't see a lot of old people. It's like, why would you live in the city? It's kind of crazy. And the taxi drivers are looking out. They don't want to lose their license. Maybe self-driving cars will help this. I feel like it's going to reduce the congestion on some of the roads, and there's already good public transportation where you're at. And this is a big argument for me, actually, for why electric bikes should be just kind of treated like normal bikes in all states, as long as they adhere to some sort of like 20 mile per hour top speed or pedal assist or something, because we have great bike paths. You're on a bike, you're using it to get to work, and if you're not technically allowed to be on the bike path or something, no one really enforces it, but if you're avoiding it and then you're riding with the cars, you do become a little bit more vulnerable. And in that case especially, getting some good lights that are going to be reliable and bright and everything, I think that's really important. Do you have any more thoughts to add to this, Chris, before we transition to like some news? Or
yeah, just on that same topic about, kind of cyclists and cities and that sort of thing. I think this has been a hot topic in, cities across the world. And, I think that, if you might have seen some of those images where they have kind of people in cars, people on a bus, and then people on bikes, and kind of showing like what the footprint is of, these different modes of transportation. And it's always dramatically less in, people on bicycles. So it makes sense for, cities that are experiencing or pollution or whatever. Actually, that kind of segues into one of the news topics, which was Oslo, Norway. That now they're giving up to $1,200 to people that want to purchase electric cargo bikes. Apparently, they're having some pretty big issues there with air quality, and they're really just trying to encourage people to look at some different solutions and start to kind of move in that direction. So I had put that post up that I think I don't know, it came up
I just linked to it.
Like
yeah, this is great, Chris, and it has the big yellow bike.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like pretty gnarly looking thing there.
Yeah,
that's a great rebate, though.
It really is. It's pretty tremendous. I mean, you could think if that was to exist here, like what that might do, and I think some places have started to do that. I heard of years ago that in Austin, Texas, the power company was actually giving some money back. I don't know how much, but that sort of thing is pretty tremendous. And I don't know if actually, I think Rocket Electrics might have been involved in that. Do you know anything about this? I know you had lived in Austin for a while.
Guess who used that rebate once when they bought a bike from Rocket Electrics? That was it. Especially in the early years of this, I'm just like some guy wandering into the shop and like, hey, can I review your bikes? And they didn't know me. And I'd bought a bike online and had just kind of a poor experience. It was heavy. It just didn't satisfy my desires. I knew e-bikes could be so much more, but I didn't realize there was a shop nearby. So once I figured that out, I took a loss on the online bike, but I sold it before it was like too used, because I was like, man, no one's going to be able to fix this. No one knows about this company. And I went into Rocket Electrics and I bought I think it was more like a commuter style bike from them, but it was quite expensive, and it was like $2,500, which to me was like, that's a lot of money. Now, with the options that a lot of these bikes have with lights and with better suspension, bigger batteries, mid-drive motors, like this was kind of like your old school hub motor with like a rear rack battery. Not very stable, not very cool looking in my opinion. So, but it performed so much better, and I needed it to commute to work. So, I was kind of in the process of buying it, and they were like, well, hey, we have this special that rebate. So I think it was like $100 or something like that, which was like, hey, I'll take it for sure. And you buy the bike and maybe fill out some paperwork and submit it, and that was to help keep Austin less crowded, because it's crazy. Like the traffic in Austin can be nuts, and they actually do have some decent bike trails and stuff. So it was a great experience all around. I'd love to see that in more places. So great story.
Yeah, and and $100 is not a whole lot, especially in contrast to $1,200 what Oslo, Norway is doing. But I think that anything helps, and I think for cities to show a commitment to this sort of thing and encourage it, it makes sense. And I'm sure if they really factor out the costs of maintaining automobile infrastructure and and the air quality and everything else,
Parking.
it definitely makes sense. Yeah, parking, absolutely. So, I definitely hope to see more of this. I think that California will probably end up seeing, some of that soon now that they kind of have passed the legislation now, on the authority for the laws. And now I think the next step probably will be doing the rebates and that sort of thing. I think, we see that with solar. I think that's been a very big driving factor in, getting more people to use solar. And, I really hope that we can start seeing more of this, more cities kind of get on board and embracing this technology.
That this a flood of memories here. It just the different places I've lived. I've seen a lot more bike infrastructure happening in Colorado. We saw a lot in New York, and it does take some money, but if you can reduce congestion on those streets for trucks that are moving stuff, and you can get rid of some of the potholes. I saw an article the other day that was like, I think UPS was spending a lot more money on tires for their trucks because the city infrastructure was kind of crumbling in some places, and it just beats up the trucks. And these are like utility trucks. You imagine someone who has like a Honda Civic or some basic car, and you're trying not to get end up stranded. A bike, this is also the reason I like bikes with suspension and stuff, is because regardless of the pavement situation, you can kind of ride around it and just deal with that with comfort with the thud buster. So we're getting a lot of these same topics. One of the reasons I liked e-bikes and got into this space to begin with is because it can be this bipartisan, non-controversial thing. It's like, hey, bikes, like, it's a bike. No one really gets angry at that. Electric bikes, it's maybe more efficient depending on the food you eat and how you're using it as commuter. And they are doing pretty well even without rebates. It's not the kind of thing, some people, it's like, hey, we don't need government subsidies and stuff, and you get in a big argument about what industries get subsidies and what kind of negative externalities they may be producing for us. But e-bikes, it's like, it's a bike. You got it helps you go further. Pretty simple. I'm a fan of these rebates if it helps the city. Man, I was paying like $15 a day just to park in downtown Austin, and that's not including wear and tear on my vehicle and gas. And so I was happy to put that money towards paying a little higher rent and living where I could bike to work, and I was so much happier, and I could just go from there. I met a lot of people. It was just such a great experience. It's part of why I started Electric Bike Review. So anyway, it's a bit of a rant from me, but I just wanted to connect some of those dots. Like, I was going to buy the bike regardless of the $100, but it was a nice little selling point for Rocket Electric. And for a city like Austin, I was paying taxes. I was living there. Sales tax is higher. Great. Spend some of that money and balance out your traffic flows, and it might come back to you in road wear. So yeah, good story, Chris.
It was coming from a power company too, though, right? Not coming from the city government specifically.
I think you're right
in that example.
I wish I had more details on this. I feel like I could call I
up on their website, actually.
Let me see if I can
So
figure that out again.
I don't know if it's the same thing. I had it's Austin Energy. I guess. Yeah, plug in Austin. I guess,
I wonder what their position is on that. Was it like good publicity for them, or was it like because you're buying power from them instead of like oil companies, essentially? It's like, yeah, we want to sell more electricity, so buy this device that requires electricity. Like, what's the angle?
Yeah, I don't really get that so much either. I guess maybe it is kind of pushing that trend towards more electric vehicles. It's kind of, and I think that's the challenge overall we have in the U.S. You kind of have to hit that tipping point. You know, what do you call it? Critical mass, right? There's actually
Yeah.
kind of cycling movement called critical mass, but that idea of having enough people doing it that it kind of becomes mainstream.
Hmm.
I think certain groups probably recognize that you need to get there, and maybe doing these rebates or what have you will kind of help a little bit more.
Well, okay, so I'm looking at their website now. There are a couple pages I found on the Austin Energy website, but it talks about Bike Texas getting first rebates. And this is in 2016, so I'm talking about 2013. But they're actually saying, depending on the price and the range of the vehicle, they've got e-bikes, e-scooters, e-motorcycles, e-mopeds. It can go from $100
up to $300, huh?
400
I'm looking at
400
it
up
now.
to 400. If you spend over $2,000 on your bike, that's $400.
Wow,
That's really cool.
pretty
That's
big deal.
Yeah, that's a big chunk out of your. I mean, that could be like kind of a quarter discount off of your bike. And there's this other company there I want to call a shout out to, Electric Avenue Scooters and Motorbikes. They're also in Austin, Texas. I got my motorcycle license training with them, and they let me train with an electric motorcycle, which was really cool because it's a lot easier to use. You don't need to worry about the clutch or anything like that. They're quiet. You don't have to worry about oil dripping on your driveway or anything. This is a really cool little shop, and for them to be kind of helping people to get certified and then selling these electric motors, they have scooters as well as electric bikes. That's cool. So, please check them out if you're in the area. Give them some business. Stop by.
Cool. Yeah. So
There was one
what else
more
is
news
going
story
on?
you had, right, Chris?
Yeah, there was one other that was Felt, which produces some electric bikes. One of the early adopters in the U.S. They were recently acquired by a large ski company.
Yeah,
I don't
Rosignol.
even know how you pronounce it. Rosignol?
Yeah, Rosignol. I grew up in Colorado skiing and
Yeah,
stuff.
you're a ski guy. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. And then it said something about maybe they're gonna do a bike, like a Rosignol bike.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. I guess, yeah, you would know better than I. I mean, as far as the company and that sort of thing. But it seems like it's a good move for Felt. They're kind of, maybe it will help with some of their, global distribution and that sort of thing. And they both seem to be focused on like really high quality stuff. And
Huh. I
we'll see what goes on with that and how it relates to electric bikes. I don't know. I mean, I think there's some stuff in the works maybe in Europe, and I don't know if it's going to end up trickling its way over here or not.
Yeah.
They got a lot of different things going on. I know they recently introduced a track bike with the drive side on the bike as opposed to the right side.
Huh.
It was supposed to perform better in the velodrome, and this was a very big deal. And I guess it's kind of showing some of their engineering capabilities, but
To be
that's kind of interesting.
frank, didn't you had some felt bikes, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah, we still carry them, and they have they still have pretty nice products in the market, and this year I think the big releases for them was they have a speed version of that bike, which is pretty nice, and they're doing some stuff with Shimano. And they have actually one of the only bikes in the U.S. Currently with the sync. The new Versa has the H sync on it.
What is the H sync?
So it's an automatic shifting. So it's fully automatic, which I think you reviewed the Cube SUV Race,
Mm-hmm.
which has that same system on it. And so this was just a low step bike with that same, Bosch drive and the New Vinci H Sync. What was your experience with that? What's your thoughts about it?
Okay, I've heard it called like the New Vinci Harmony. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's a Harmony H Sync.
Okay.
I guess that's just kind of like a different variety of it.
And is there high speed bike? Is that the Sport E? You cut out when you were saying that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is the Sport E. It's HP now. That's the high powered or high speed version.
Yeah, I'm excited. I came in as like a felt fanboy. I like their designs, and I think about like their triathlon bikes, just the cool look. Like they kind of have this mean like black paint job on a lot of their bikes. And I reviewed a ton of them, and they started out, it's like, $5,800, $4,000, $4,000, 47,000. Some of them are pretty expensive, but very cool. Like I'm thinking the Outfitter, which is like this camouflaged
Right.
fat tire bike with super burly racks. And then the Brew Hall, which is, it's just fun. They seem to do a good job with design and marketing, but it's in that higher, more premium price point. And I think a lot of them used Bosch.
I think they brought some of their prices down now too, though. Like they have the 9E, which is a very lightweight mountain bike. It's like $3,000,
Nice.
which is definitely a nice bike for the money. And even the Sport E, it's like I think 3,700 or something like that for a high speed, Bosch powered bike. It's not too bad.
Yeah, thank you. I'll have to check those out because some of these reviews
Yeah.
are, years old at this point,
Sure.
nonstop.
So it's always changing, right? It's tough to keep up sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's why these podcasts are fun. Get to touch base, hear about updates. I don't have any news besides just working on the site and stuff. I did the video about my car camping thing. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
That was fun.
It's always been something pretty impressive about your situation. You've been pretty innovative with how you're with resources and that sort of thing. It's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I was excited to share, but you've been someone who's hosted me before on several occasions and made a lot of this possible. So I want to say thanks again. And
Yeah.
I guess we'll look for next week. I did that video as a little off topic of e-bikes, but just because it was like, hey, I feel like I got to the point where I could share that, and some people will be like, that's crazy, but I think other people will be like, hey, done a good job, and I didn't want to. It's kind of neat to share and connect people. So, yeah.
That's actually to kind of tie this in a little bit more e-bike related too. That's Boise Electric Bikes. I don't know if you know those folks out there at all, but a work van that they also like travel with, that they live inside. It's kind of a sprinter van, and they can hold, I think, 4 electric bikes or something like that inside of it. And then we actually went to a dealer event out in California, and they drove out there from Boise, Idaho, and their van set up, and it was really quite cool. And I was pretty impressed. I guess it's kind of that van life thing, which is becoming bigger. Yeah, that's always been something that's pretty appealing to me. I don't know where I would keep something like that here in New York, but it would be cool to kind of have a little getaway car in that way.
Yeah, makes the whole thing possible, and keeps it kind of fun too. So, I guess that's great. We hopefully Brett's okay out there. Maybe we'll see him next week, and of course we check the comments for ideas and topics and stuff, but this one was organized by you. I appreciate it, Chris, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
For sure. Later.